On November 5th, the Americans will vote for their next president. Right now, the United States of America is more divided than ever, and the stakes are much higher, stretching far beyond America's borders. With wars raging in Europe and the Middle East and challenges to the state's leadership from rising powers like China and Russia, the outcome of this election will define America's role on the world stage for years to come. This election was initially set to be a rematch of 2020, but took a stunning turn in July when President Joe Biden withdrew from the race, endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. Since then, the U.S. political scene has been shaken. Biden's decision came after rising concerns about his health, magnified by a stumbling debate performance that left many questioning his ability to lead.
Ensure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Meanwhile, on the Republican side, tensions continue to rise following a failed assassination attempt on Trump earlier this year, a moment that only solidified his supporters' resolve and added fuel to his campaign. We all know elections are events that can move markets, and the U.S. is a major player on the world stage, and its leadership sets the tone for international relations. The next U.S. president must steer the nation through crises across the globe, including worsening violence in the Middle East, Russian President Vladimir Putin's refusal to retreat from Ukraine, and U.S. China trade relations. So, where do both candidates stand on such global issues? And how will the 2024 U.S. presidential elections redefine global dynamics? Domestically, the 2024 election is a referendum on the U.S. economy. Inflation, unemployment, and growing inequality are at the forefront of voters' concerns. Kamala Harris is expected to follow Biden's economic approach, focusing on job creation through infrastructure and clean energy projects, and supporting social safety nets to reduce income inequality. Harris has said her day one priority would be trying to reduce food and housing costs for working families. Moreover, she wants to raise taxes on big businesses and Americans making $400,000 a year. But she has also unveiled a number of measures that would ease the tax burden on families, including an expansion of child tax credits. In contrast, Trump has criticized these initiatives as costly, promising tax cuts, deregulation, and policies aimed at reducing inflation through energy independence and protectionist trade policies. He also wants fewer government regulations on the economy. And if we talk about trade, Trump has made tariffs a central pledge in this campaign. He has proposed new 10 to 20% tariffs on most foreign goods and much higher ones on those from China. While Harris has criticized Trump's sweeping plan to put tariffs on imports, calling it a national tax on working families, which will cost each household $4,000 a year, she is expected to have a more targeted approach to taxing imports. On healthcare, Harris's campaign promises to take on big pharma to lower drug prices and cap insulin costs, and build on the healthcare policies of the Biden administration. Harris has also called for medical debt forgiveness and to enhance premium support through the Affordable Care Act, which her campaign claims will save millions of Americans an average of $800 per year. While Trump has called for dismantling Obamacare and replacing it with a market-driven approach. In fact, he claimed to possess concepts of a plan for U.S. healthcare, and the former president has been accused of flip-flopping on the issue. Immigration policy is another flashpoint. In fact, immigration has emerged as one of the most critical issues for voters in the 2024 U.S. presidential elections. As vice president, Harris was put in charge of immigration and border security by President Biden. She has been criticized for not doing enough to stem irregular migration. If she were to become president, Harris wants to sign into law the tough border compromise that Congress was unable to pass in 2024 after Trump objected to it. She has pledged to reform the immigration system and offer a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, while also improving border security in a humane way. On the other hand, Trump has promised the largest deportation operation in U.S. history if he is elected. He wants to reimpose strict immigration regulations he instituted during his time in office, like a travel ban on citizens from certain majority Muslim countries like Iran, Syria, Somalia, and Yemen. So their positions reflect two very different visions for how the U.S. addresses the economic and social welfare, which will have long-term consequences for millions of Americans. However, these domestic debates are just one side of the story. While the U.S. wrestles with its internal challenges, the world beyond its borders is bracing for impact. So let's zoom out and talk about the bigger stage, the international arena. Firstly, there is the Russia-Ukraine war that continues to be a key issue in international politics. Kamala Harris has pledged that the U.S. will support Ukraine for as long as it takes in defending its sovereignty against Russian aggression. She has been involved in peace talks and called for increased military aid to Ukraine. Trump, on the other hand, has been skeptical of long-term U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts and has suggested that Europe should take on a greater burden in supporting Ukraine. Although he has said that, if elected, he'd stop the war between Ukraine and Russia within 24 hours, without offering many details about how he'd do so. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, tensions are at an all-time high, especially with the Israel-Gaza conflict and Iran's influence in the region. Harris, just like current President Biden, supports Israel in its ongoing war against the Islamist militant group Hamas and says that the U.S. will continue to help Israel defend its right to exist if she becomes president. But she has been more open than Biden in calling out the suffering in Gaza. She's also supported the Iran nuclear deal and voted for restrictions on arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Trump, on the other hand, has a drastically different approach. He supports Israel and Saudi Arabia without hesitation, while showing a hardline stance against Iran. In fact, he has positioned himself as a staunch supporter of Israel. And let's not forget, NATO, a cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy and the future of the alliance, is also at stake in this election. Harris has positioned herself as a strong supporter of multilateral cooperation and NATO. Trump, on the other hand, has been critical of NATO and has even threatened to pull the U.S. out of NATO. In fact, in his convention speech, he complained that the U.S. has been taken advantage of for a long time by allies. And of course, beyond these immediate geopolitical crises, the U.S. is also facing challenges to its global dominance from emerging powers and shifting alliances. The BRICS coalition is gaining momentum as an economic counterweight to the U.S. and its Western allies. Harris is likely to favor deeper diplomatic engagement with these emerging economies, aiming for cooperation on global challenges like climate change. And for Trump, BRICS represents a threat, a group of nations eager to cut America down to size. Expect confrontation, not cooperation. Speaking of threats, China and Russia are working to reshape the global order, presenting a formidable challenge to U.S. hegemony. Trump's policies would likely continue his first-term trend of economic decoupling from China, escalating trade wars and taking a tough stance on technology and military competition. Harris, on the other hand, is expected to pursue a more nuanced strategy, engaging China in areas of mutual interest like climate change while maintaining competition in tech and security. Moreover, the next president will also determine how the U.S. engages with multilateral institutions like the United Nations and the World Trade Organization. Harris supports strengthening these institutions, while Trump has been openly critical, suggesting that they undermine U.S. sovereignty and pushing for reforms that align with his America First agenda. So, as we approach November 2024, the stakes could not be higher. Whoever wins the presidential elections, the foreign policy is in for a shakeup, and the world will be a more uncertain place. Stay tuned as we continue to follow the road to 2024 U.S. presidential elections. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analysis and coverage of the 2024 U.S. elections.